Let's talk about the age of humanism. Is it coming back, or has it ended permanently? Now, obviously, I don't think it's ended permanently, or I wouldn't be doing this show. I wouldn't have optimism about the state of the human race. But there's no question that this global authoritarian trend is real, it's prevalent, and it's causing an unbelievable amount of human suffering across the globe. Donald Trump is operating concentration camps, ripping families apart. Duterte is fighting a brutal campaign that targets the underclass in the guise of a drug war. Jair Bolsonaro is empowering an incredibly violent security, policing, and paramilitary sources to escalate a racialized and underclass war in Brazil. There was a coup in Bolivia. The far right governs Hungary. The far right governs Russia. The far right governs India. This is a real trend. It governs the United States and it governs the UK. The clownish behavior of many of these leaders, with the exceptions of Modi, Erdogan, and Putin, who at least have a certain efficacy. Netanyahu, depending on the day, can go in between effective apartheid authoritarian or a clown fascist as he struggles under this recent indictment. But that cannot obscure the fact of the unbelievable amount of suffering that is being inflicted on the LGBT community, the structural assault on labor, the indigenous, the poor, minorities of every possible background, and the structural war against a pluralistic society. But all of this cultural focus should not obscure the fundamental class dynamics that drive this politics. And that's not disconnected from recognizing that the disaster of neoliberalism of the past several decades, which first of all set in place the precursors to all of these policies. You could not have the Trump on war on immigration if Bill Clinton did not sign vindictive, cruel, and punitive immigration legislation in 1996, if Democrats did not go along with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and if Barack Obama did not ramp up deportations. So while Trump is of a different kind, is not the same thing, all of the stages were set by neoliberalism. And the other thing that neoliberalism set, and it was noted recently by even Joschka Fischer, the former German foreign minister who went from 60s radical to ultra promoter of internationalist liberalism and elitist multilateralism, that the focus on "it's the economy, stupid" distracted from people's sense of needing to have meaning and purpose in their lives. This is what the anthropologist Scott Atran talks about when he documents why young people join extremist movements, whether it be the alt-right or ISIS. So there is a dual function here. There's serious material deprivation and instability and immiseration, which is accelerated by deregulated aggressive capitalism, which is essentially just exporting back home what it had exported overseas to the periphery through World Bank and IMF programs, coming back home, implementing vicious anti-labor and austerity budgets, causing rage, causing humiliation, causing anger, causing suffering, without any proper answers from almost all mainstream center-left parties. And then at the same time, people were told to simply max out their credit cards, consume and consume and consume, and that there was no real purpose in life. Nothing other than to be an economic animal. The right, the smart global authoritarian right, has recognized both of these dimensions and has provided disastrous, horrifying, and wrong answers, but they've been asking the right questions, unlike the neoliberals who set the stages. Now, Achille Mbembe is a Cameroonian philosopher who's had a very big influence on me, and I want to quote from an indispensable essay he wrote in 2016 called "The Age of Humanism is Ending." Neoliberal capitalism has left in its wake a multitude of destroyed subjects, many of whom are deeply convinced that their immediate future will be one of continuous exposure to violence and existential threat. They genuinely long for some sense of certainty, the sacred, hierarchy, religion, and tradition. They believe nations have become akin to swamps that need to be drained, and the world as it is should be brought to an end. For this to happen, everything should be cleansed of. They are convinced that they can only be saved by violent struggle to restore their masculinity, the loss of which they attribute to the weaker among them, the weak they do not want to become. Neoliberalism destroyed communities. It atomized people. It still atomizes people to this day. The very functionality of this technology does precisely that by unregulated authoritarian tech companies, which, even as Joschka Fischer said, again, certainly no great progressive leader with a very checkered record, but he's, even as he was strongly criticizing the Chinese model, said, I wouldn't put my faith in California for democracy either. Let's be real. The collective became the individual. Concretely, social welfare was destroyed, and more of our lives have become seen as commodities rather than needs to be met. The project put into place during the neoliberalism left ready-made apparatus for the right wing to use, and they're using it with brutal efficiency, while all too much of the center and the left has not provided a powerful material vision or figured out a way to synthesize a new vision of openness, pluralism, and democracy that addresses the ravages of various forms of fundamental bigotries and oppressions without further atomizing and separating the ability to have a cohesive movement and a broader sense that everybody desires of some type of community, purpose, and shared vision. There's no contradiction there. And that needs to be provided. You see it to some extent in the Sanders movement. You certainly see it in President Lula. You see it in Cornel West. You see it in fact, Nina Turner, who we'll be talking to. But we need to hone that vision. Achille Mbembe warned that the transformation of the political into business raises the risks of the elimination of the very possibility of politics. This is the task ahead of us. Reclaim the political from business and change individual consciousness into collective consciousness so we can build a future for the many. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I would just add very quickly that this is exactly the project that the right wing has always wanted, that was implemented by the neoliberal apparatuses that really created the foundations that you see somebody like Trump that is using so effectively today. So just to be a little bit clear about that, Donald Trump is very famous for being an absolute idiot and a fool and somebody who's unable to implement a lot of the policies that he wants. But when you look at what he actually has been able to accomplish, those were things that he inherited from previous administrations, and he's been able to use them with brutal efficiency. When he wants to create something new, he's not very able to do it, but he's able to harness popular anger and frustration and turn it and use it in the most wicked fashion, using tools that have been given to him by the previous neoliberal order.
Absolutely.
You know, just that kind of makes me think of this thing. You know how certain phrases stick in your mind? Like, for instance, when we were talking about Trump in 2015, we would make the comparison, like, are we going to be like the liberals in Weimar Germany who left as Hitler rose? And like, that's, I can't forget having that conversation. Yes. Immediately I'm like, yeah. But even like, as I was saying, I'm like, oh, I'm probably going to remember this. Right. Oh shit, I forgot. Never mind. Let's move on.
Wait. You don't have anything, or were you going to play something?
I was trying to
forget your
play something else, but I forgot what I was trying to jump off of Griscom's point from, so I apologize. What?
It's all good. The point is, don't be like Weimar Germany.
Oh, yeah. So David Plotz said at one time, like in 2008, I was listening to the awful Slate Political Gabfest. It was the early days as far as podcasts go, folks.
The aptly named David Plotz.
But he was making a case, actually, that was fairly well observed in that, like, Obama's creating all this, like the drone, it was specifically about the drone warfare.
Right.
And it's like, well, God forbid someone worse comes in after Obama and everyone everyone's just like, I mean, it probably wouldn't be that bad, right? Like, it might be Romney or something like that. And I can't get that rings in my ears.
That rings, and that's also what was so incredible of how many people who now kind of fetishize institutionalism. That was their answer to a systemic institutional critique of the Obama administration running a global unchecked drone war. He seems like a nice guy.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously.
And
how bad could it get?
we could get
also, like Keith Ellison predicting Trump might win is another.
Keith Ellison got
those.
laughed in his face. By the way, Keith Ellison gave a good. We talked about Ilhan Omar, of course, stole the show at the Minnesota rally. Keith Ellison gave an amazing speech for Bernie, and I am so glad that he's the Attorney General. We need people in those positions.
Well, because if we allow these projects to continue, then the worst kind of people are going to come and take advantage of the chaos. So it's like, we've had years of atomization. People have been thinking of themselves as individuals. The society has been completely destroyed for most people, right? Like Margaret Thatcher's like dream of the end of society, like very much was happening all across the world. And then you have somebody like Trump or any fascist. What they do is they tell these people, it's like, oh no, you're not just like a depressed worker or whatever. You're a member of a great nation state, and you're a member of a great race, and you're going to, steamroll everyone else. And it pulls people into their thrall. I mean, obviously it's a complete fantasy, and it's used to destroy, obviously, the targets of the vitriol and hatred, but also the communities that these people are coming from themselves. And, it's just something that neoliberals are never going to be able to get us out of this crisis because they created the conditions that allowed the crisis to come into being in the first place.
They don't have any meaning. They don't have answers on meaning and community, and they don't have answers on inequality and materiality. And those are the two. You need a healthy, pluralistic, open, democratic alternative on community and continuity that also recognizes those things as actual important human needs that can't just be shuttled off to tech and capital. And then you need to reverse fundamentally the human devastation. And they have answers, and not only don't they have answers on either, they're wrong. And yes, every country has its own particularities, and there's a through line from Trump to the founding of this country with regards to race. There's no question. And certainly the second founding with regards to the South and Reconstruction. And there's a fascism that never disappeared in continental Europe. And there is a literal neo-fascism in places like Brazil. And there is a massive, grotesque U.S. foreign policy over post-Cold War Russia, which helped metastasize a right-wing petrostate trying to reassert its positionality in the world. There's all these unique cases, but there is the through line is that there's sets of conditions that have been established of which there is no answer provided by the quote-unquote center. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.